Just 1 minute, I'll ask them to start. Yeah. Respected Principal Panse Madam, guest speaker for today, Dr. Meenakshi Sundaresan Madam, Vice Principals of Arts, Science and Commerce, the IQAC Coordinator, Dr. Vaishali Somni Madam, all the dignitaries of NVIS SACON, Professor Golden Sir, and dear students. Very good morning to one and all. I welcome you this morning on the occasion of the guest lecture organized by the Department of Statistics under the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav Women of Matter series. Today we have with us Dr. Meenakshi Sundaresan from DG Ruparel College. I now request Principal Panse Madam to welcome our guest speaker for today.
Respected Vice Principals of Maharishi Dayanand College, the Head of the Department of Statistics, Dr. Shilpa Khare, IQAC Coordinator, Dr. Vaishali Somni, Principal Scientists from NVIS SACON, Dr. Golden Cordris, and today's resource person and my dear friend, Meenakshi Sundaresan, whom I more comfortably call as Manjeet. Well, good morning all, and Meenakshi Madam, welcome you to this forum today. To give you a little brief idea about this program we are doing in collaboration with NVIS SACON, and this is Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, where we have 75 lectures all by women of matter, and you are one of the women of matter. I think I need not give you any idea about the college, because you have, I think for nearly 38 years you have been visiting MD College and you know in and out of MD College. But today's this program, all these 75 lectures which we are having are all related to environment. And the team from SACON has also helped us a lot and also organized many lectures. So without taking much time, I welcome you to my college, to this Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav program. And I'm sure we are going to have a very interactive session because the topic is very nice and it is close to your heart because you have done research in that area. Cadmium toxicity is one which you have really worked very hard. I welcome you once again, and I request Madam to start with the proceedings.
Thank you, Panse Madam. I now request Dr. Rishikesh Dalvi, sir, to introduce our guest speaker for today, Dr. Meenakshi Madam.
Thank you so much, Khare Madam. It is indeed a pleasure for me to introduce today's guest, Dr. Meenakshi Sundaresan. Dr. Meenakshi Sundaresan, she is a retired head and professor in the Department of Zoology, and she has a teaching experience of about 38 years in DG Ruparel College of Arts, Science and Commerce. She is also a recognized guide for PhD and MSc teaching. She is a recipient of the College and University Open Merit Scholarship for the UG and PG courses and was a university rank holder at the MSc level. She has completed her doctorate on cadmium-induced cytotoxical and histological changes in freshwater fish, that is Tilapia mozambica. Her research interests include cell biology, toxicology, aquatic pollution, and biotechnology. She has about 21 research publications and 2 projects to her credit. She has also authored 2 university textbooks for the undergraduate courses and has attended various national and international conferences. Her administrative profile links her to various committees at the college and as well as the university level. She has organized various workshops and has provided expertise through students of zoology department in various environmental impact agencies. With this small brief CV, an introduction, I hand over the session to Sundaresan Madam and look forward to hear her. Sundaresan Madam.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rishikesh. Very good morning to Principal Dr. Chaya Panse, Vice Principals of MD College, all dignitaries of Envis, SACON, Dr. Golden Quadros, Principal Scientist of SACON, my teacher colleagues, and all my dear students. Today, I would like to brief you on heavy metals and their toxic effects in the environment. And I thank Principal Dr. Chaya Panse and Dr. Shilpa Khare for having given me this occasion to share whatever knowledge I have on this particular topic. So, today we shall talk a little bit on heavy metal pollution and its toxic effects. So can we start with the presentation, Dr.
Yes.
Shilpa?
Yes, madam, please.
So is my screen visible?
Yes, madam.
Yeah. So the topic for today is cadmium toxicity in the environment, and the term heavy metals is refers to basically a metallic element which has a relatively high density and in very small concentrations, it is toxic or poisonous. And these heavy metals, they are actually found in the environment in very small amounts, and they enter our bodies via food, drinking water, and air. As trace elements, these heavy metals are important for maintenance of the human body, basically in metabolism. A few of them are essential to the human body, like examples are copper, zinc, cobalt, manganese, iron, etc. However, at higher concentrations, these trace elements can lead to poisoning. So this heavy metal poisoning basically could result from drinking water contamination or through high ambient air concentrations which are near the emission source or intake via the food chain. So as you can see here, we have the various heavy metals which have been listed in this particular slide. So widespread pollution of these heavy metals in the environment is a big cause for concern. As you can see, because of their toxic nature, their ability to bioaccumulate in various organs, and their tendency to cause biomagnification, these heavy metals, they cause wreck and havoc to the organism, and they upset the entire food chain in the ecosystem. The word bioaccumulation is where there is tendency of this particular heavy metal to accumulate in the various organs of various animals, including man. And the word biomagnification, as you can see in this picture, is how at the producer level, smaller fish, when they contain a small amount of heavy metal, many such small fish get eaten up by the large fish, and many such large fish in turn get eaten up by larger fishes. So as the food chain goes upwards, you can see that there is a drastic increase in the concentration of the heavy metal in the food chain. So this is what we call as biomagnification. Coming to the details of these heavy metals, I shall be restricting myself to the cadmium heavy metal, as this particular heavy metal is the most toxic and it has lot of harmful effects on the ecosystem. So this particular metal, cadmium, it was discovered by uh, Dr. Friedrich Stromeyer, and this heavy metal is a relatively rare, soft bluish white metal having an atomic number of 48, and it has got a molecular weight of 112. And this cadmium, it is said to be very much similar to zinc, which is another heavy metal. But this zinc is said to be a trace element which is necessary for carrying out many functions which are basically enzymes required in metabolism. So this similarity of cadmium to zinc is the one which causes alarm, because cadmium easily can replace zinc and it can inhibit the enzyme activities related to zinc. Also, cadmium is very much soluble in acid, dilute nitric and concentrated sulfuric acids. And because of this, the shallow waters which are used for drinking purposes, when they are acidified, this acid helps to dissolve the cadmium and lead which is there in the pipes, and that leads to a lot of contamination in the drinking water. Well, this slide shows us many of the sources of cadmium contamination, and you can categorize them basically into two types. One, you can say, are natural sources of cadmium available in the environment, and the other would include the man-made or anthropogenic sources. Coming to the naturally occurring sources of cadmium in the environment, you can see that it is found in the form of rocks called as greenockite, which is found in association with a particular rock called as flareite, which is associated with zinc and sulfide. So this is found in very small quantities, but other natural sources would include forest fires, volcanoes, and then when we come to anthropogenic sources, we have many of them which lead to cadmium contamination of the environment. So anthropogenic sources would include basically all byproducts of mining, smelting, and refining activities of sulfide ores of zinc, lead, and copper as alloys, then burning of fossil fuels and municipal waste, dust generated from recycling of iron and steel scrap. Then cadmium is also used as a polishing and an anti-friction and rust proofer. Besides, it is used in semiconductors and control rods of nuclear reactors. It is used for metal plating. It's used in cadmium, production of cadmium nickel batteries, pigments, plastics, and many other synthetics. And the main source of contamination of cadmium in the soil is what we call as these fertilizers. So cadmium, to a very large extent, is used in manufacture of fertilizers, which, if not used in specific quantities, would lead to a heavy contamination of food or the crops grown on such soil and eventually in water. Besides fertilizers, we also have cigarette smoke and tobacco plants. This is another major source which leads to cadmium contamination. And as you can see here in this slide, the cadmium efficiency is 1.13 to 1.96 μg per cigarette. And most of this is inhaled in the form of smoke. Whether you are a passive smoker or an active smoker, cadmium definitely gets into your blood in such cases. Besides this, all of us regularly use hair cosmetics, lipsticks, creams, eyeshadow. All these also are samples which contain lead and cadmium. So these heavy metals, they make a part of most of the things which are present in our environment. And therefore, we need to be aware of the various sources which lead to contamination of cadmium in the environment, and the way in which these pollutants get into our bodies could be categorized mainly in the form of air, which we inhale, or it could get into the bodies of organisms via water, and thirdly, via intake of food. So coming to the various ways in which this particular heavy metal enters the organism, as I mentioned, the first one is through air, which we inhale. So most of the activities which are carried out by man, like burning of fossil fuels or smelting or refining or mining activities, all of these activities, they generate a good amount of airborne particles which can get carried long distances, and especially in places where the emission levels are high, industrial areas or metallurgical plants. These areas, the inhalation of this particular heavy metal would definitely be high. And as I mentioned about cigarette smoking, that also would lead to an increase in the cadmium concentration of the individual. They say that an individual who daily smokes about 20 cigarettes per day can take as much as 2 to 4 μg of cadmium into his body. Then we come to water. Cadmium concentration in unpolluted natural waters would be maximum 1 μg per liter. But contamination of drinking water with these heavy metals mainly occurs because of impurity of zinc in the galvanized pipes, or the presence of cadmium which are found in soldiers in fittings, water heaters or water coolers and taps. And sometimes this drinking water is available in shallow wells where the water needs to be acidified. And cadmium easily gets dissolved in these acids, And that's what leads to the corrosion of these plumbing systems, which then contaminate the water to a very large extent. So these are the ways in which, this particular heavy metal, cadmium, would enter into the human body. And last but not the least is food, where they say that the main source of cadmium intake for non-occupationally exposed people, crops, are crops which have been grown in polluted soils, which have been irrigated with polluted water containing cadmium, or there could have been overuse of fertilizers which contain cadmium heavy metal to a large extent, or they could be eating meat from animals which have grazed on these contaminated pastures. So all these sources are the ones which are responsible for contamination of cadmium, even for those non-occupationally exposed people. Besides, all of us eat seafood, where fishes are known to accumulate cadmium to quite a good extent. And because of bioaccumulation, most of these fishes, they start accumulating this particular heavy metal in their kidneys, their liver, the gills, and their gut. And not only fishes, you also have other organisms like shellfish, crabs, oysters, etc. So all of them have this tendency to bioaccumulate cadmium. And as it enters the food chain, it has the tendency to biomagnify. So this is how, the cadmium enters through the organisms and create toxicity to them. So this particular slide, as you can see, shows how cadmium as a heavy metal is going to be affecting man and organisms, whether the source is occupational or environmental, or whether the source of cadmium is in your diet or it's in your medicine. As we are all aware that Ayurvedic medicines also contain some amount of heavy metals. So as soon as we get exposed to these various heavy metals, it leads to organ toxicity. So most of the organs in our body, they get affected by these heavy metals. And this toxicity by these heavy metals, they are known to generate what we call as free radicals. And these free radicals, they affect the enzymatic reactions in the body and lead to what we call as oxidative stress. And this oxidative stress may affect the lipids, it may affect the proteins, or it may affect the DNA, leading to either the cell membrane damage, or it may lead to enzyme inhibition or inactivation of certain proteins, or it may also affect your DNA, leading to its damage, which may either lead to apoptosis or cell death, or it can lead to carcinogenicity. So here we can see that this particular heavy metal is quite toxic, and not only cadmium, most of the heavy metals, they are known for creating toxicity to most of the organs in the human body. This chart relates to the metabolism, storage, and excretion of cadmium in the human body. And as we can see that most of the cadmium, it enters via respiration and reaches the lung, or it can enter the gastrointestinal tract via the food and drinking water. And the third way they say is it could directly enter the skin through dermal absorption. So coming to inhalation, you can see here the major source, as I said, would be from the environment, or it could be from inhalation of cigarette smoke. And this leads to what you say as acute respiratory distress syndrome. And once it reaches the lungs, there it gets converted into cadmium cysteine. And through food and drinking water, it can enter into the gastrointestinal tract. So whatever be the source of entry, this particular cadmium, it will enter into the blood, and here it will start forming complexes with various proteins, either to form metallothionein complex or a cysteine complex or a glutathione complex. And they say that a lot of research is available with respect to inhalation of cadmium through air or through water and food. But very little research is done on this particular heavy metal via skin. But they have found out using experiments with the human cadaver skin in a diffusion cell model that if you expose this skin or keep it in water which is concentrated with cadmium, there is uptake of cadmium from the soil or water up to as much as 12.7%. And if you take this water or soil which is contaminated with cadmium and you try to rub the skin of rats which have been shaved off their skin for a time period of 10 days, they say that it shows certain conditions called as hyperkeratosis and acanthosis. And there are a lot of ulcerative changes on the skin. Also, they say there's an increase in the mitotic index of the skin cells. And if you try and, see the blood, you can find traces of cadmium absorption via skin. So whatever be the source of cadmium into the organism, it will enter into the blood, and the first organ which it goes to is the liver. And here synthesis of cadmium metallothionein takes place. It leads to a destruction of the liver cells, and then it gets into the bile system and forms glutathione complexes, from where eventually it reaches the kidney. And there also it affects the kidney to a great extent. So all these complexes which it forms with the help of proteins are eventually excreted out either through urine or feces. So that's how we can detect that there is heavy metal contamination in a particular organism, either by testing the blood, or you can test the urine or feces of the individual, and you can, eventually find out whether this particular person has been exposed to heavy metal contamination. So this is regarding the various kinetics, the metabolism and storage of cadmium in the human body. So how do we analyze that the individual is exposed to this particular heavy metal? So there is something called as atomic absorption spectroscopy, which is a procedure which can analyze traces of heavy metals. Okay, so the various organs of the individual's body can be taken and analyzed through different modes of digestion, and you can actually find out the concentration of this particular heavy metal by this method, which is called as the atomic absorption spectrophotometer. So this particular instrument helps you to estimate the cadmium which has been absorbed by the individual. Then we come to what we call as toxicity produced by cadmium. Now this toxicity produced by cadmium is seen not only in animals and man, it is also seen in plants, and many tissues and parts of the plant are capable of bioaccumulating them in their organs and various parts. And this leads to what we call as organ toxicity. So here you can see in this picture, this is the most classic example of cadmium contamination, which has been found in Japan in the year 1955. And it was referred to as the Itai disease. That means the word Itai means ouch. These individuals, they experience so much pain in their body that the disease was called as Itai. And there is total collapse of the skeletal system due to decreased bone porosity. So here what has happened was the paddy fields which contained rice, they were irrigated with water which had been contaminated from nearby industrial area, which was discharging a very high amount of heavy metal, cadmium. And over a period of time, this cadmium started getting accumulated in the soil and eventually got into the rice grains, which were consumed by the people living in Japan. And this started bioaccumulating in their various organs. And this was the result. There was a total collapse of the entire skeletal system, because cadmium is known to replace calcium of the bones, and that led to a drop in the porosity of the bone, leading to such conditions. Also, there were other cases of heavy metal poisoning in the world. You have another one which is referred to as the Minamata disease. This also occurred in Japan in 1956. And it leads to this particular disease mainly because of contamination of mercury. You have another condition called as the Pink's disease, which is also because of mercury poisoning. And here you can see Blackfoot disease and arsenicosis, that is mainly caused because of arsenic poisoning in the drinking water, through drinking water contamination. So most of these heavy metals are, quite well known to create a lot of toxicity in animals, in plants, in man. And also you must have heard of the poisoning of individuals living in Faridkot district of Punjab. They say that this place has become a hotspot of cancer cases. And here there was very much overuse of pesticides, insecticides, and fertilizers in the fields. And because of this, the people staying here got very much affected. And this again was a classic example of heavy metal poisoning. So after studying the details of the environment in this particular place, they found that it was basically due to this heavy metal poisoning. So unknowingly, we make use of a good amount of fertilizers, thinking that the crops which will grow will be, very nice, and you will get a good quantity of the crop in your field. But you tend to get into such problems uh, if you do not keep a control on the amount of fertilizers or the amount of insecticides or pesticides you need to use in that particular place. Another thing which needs mention is use of Ayurvedic medicines. So they say that when individuals, they use these Ayurvedic medicines or medication, they could be at a risk of heavy metal toxicity. And there also they suggest that such testing should be made mandatory. So these are the toxic repercussions which could be created because of contamination of cadmium, or for that matter any other heavy metal in the environment. So this particular slide also shows how cadmium in low doses can lead to vomiting, diarrhea, colitis. It can cause changes in your blood pressure. It can cause changes in your chromosomes. It leads to carcinogenic effects. And heavy industrial exposure, they say, also leads to insomnia or yellowing of teeth, because cadmium, is quite toxic, and the half-life of this particular cadmium is almost 20 to 25 years in the human body. So we need to be very careful when we talk of heavy metal contamination in the environment. And here you can see that this particular heavy metal cadmium, as I said, it leads to all sorts of reactions. It interacts with calcium, affecting your bones. Being similar to zinc, it affects and inhibits the enzymes because it competes for those places where zinc is there, and it affects those reactions. It can also reduce the concentration of another protein, a ceruloplasmin, in your plasma by decreasing the concentration of copper. It can interact with iron and affect your hemoglobin levels. So toxicity by cadmium affects most of the systems of the human. You can see it affects your respiratory system, it affects your skeletal system. The major organ which gets affected is your kidneys, and it also is known to have an effect on the reproductive system and the hormones linked with it. So cadmium toxicity is, a thing which you should be made aware of because these things never cross our mind. We never think of, the repercussions of heavy metal poisoning, and we um, uh, are quite unaware sometimes that such things can occur in our environment. So I would just briefly like to throw some light on the effects of cadmium as a heavy metal on this particular fish, which was part of my work for my doctorate. So I chose this particular fish, tilapia, or Oreochromis mozambicus, for my test organism. And I subjected this fish to a particular toxicant, that is the cadmium chloride, which I mixed in the water at various concentrations. And I studied the effects, what it can induce in this fish, both at the light microscopic and at the electron microscopic level. So after having carried out a particular toxicity test, which we call as LC50, I took sublethal concentrations of that toxicant, that is cadmium chloride, and I treated the fish for different periods of time. And eventually I took the tissues and, studied the effects of cadmium on this particular fish. So basically, fish was chosen as a test organism. Why? Because fish is an important part of the food chain which is linked to man. And study of its histopathology and several key enzymatic systems in fish could be used as a sensitive bioindicator of heavy metal contamination in aquatic systems. So just to give you a brief glance of the various effects it had on this fish. So this first picture, which you can see in the slide, shows you the gills found in this fish. Here you can see there are 4 pairs of gills. And looking at the basic structure or the plan of the gill, it consists of what you call as a gill arch. Then you have primary gill filaments. And then on each of these primary gill filaments, you have secondary gill filaments. And on the internal boundary, you have something called as gill rakers. So this is the primary gill filament with the secondary filaments. And these are the various types of cells which you can see in the gill of fish. So gills are normally used for respiration. And this is a picture of the gill under the light microscopy, which has been stained with hematoxylin eosin, showing you a picture of the control gill or the fish which has been untreated with cadmium. And after having treated them with sublethal concentrations of 4 ppm for 2 days or 4 days or 6 days or 8 days, I found the various effects. And if you see the general effect, this is the overall picture of how the gill looks after it has been exposed to contamination of cadmium. You can see it has become pale whitish in color. In a normal fish, it appears to be bright red in color. So this, just by the look of it, you can make out how the cadmium pollutant has affected this fish. And these are pictures, or you can say sections taken of the gill with various concentrations treated for different periods of time, and lot of effects are seen if you compare it with the normal gill. So you can see that there is the clubbing of the secondary lamellae, then the gill rachis is affected, then there is accumulation of blood cells at the knobs of the primary gill lamellae. Then you have the secondary lamellae with swollen tips. Then you have the slowing of the epithelium, the reduction of the secondary gill lamellae. So a lot of changes are seen in these gills and the different types of cells which are associated with these gills. There is a drastic increase in what you call as the mucus cells. Then the acidophilic mast cells, they increase in size. So I have studied the various effects which cadmium can have on the gill of the fish. This slide it gives you a picture of the gill structure. You can just see 4 secondary lamellae. These are the interlamellar cells which are seen under the electron microscope. So electron microscopy basically helps us to see the organ at a very high magnification, and you can actually, see the differences in the control fish and the treated fish, what changes occur at the cellular level. So here you can see this is one secondary lamella of a normal fish, and after treatment, these are the changes which you find in the fish secondary lamella. So a lot of changes at the cellular level have been noted. There's the slowing of the epithelial lining. Then there is emarginate border of the cells, indentation of the cells. Then there are presence of exocytic vesicles seen. Cytoplasm of most of these cells, they start showing vacuolation. There's deposition of electron-dense material. So a lot of changes seen in the secondary lamellae and the various cell types which are seen in case of the fish. So this is another cell type, that is the chloride cell seen in the fish, which also shows drastic changes in the mitochondria. So here you can see this is an enlarged picture of the mitochondria of the chloride cell. So this is what you call as mitochondrial vacuolation. And this is what leads to, organ toxicity and changes in the enzymes, and eventually leading to conditions like necrosis or cell death or carcinogenity in the various organs of the organism. And as I said, there was a drastic increase in the mucus cells of the fish which has been treated with cadmium chloride. Just 6 days exposure to the heavy metal also causes such huge impacts or changes in the tissue of the fish. So various organs were studied by me. This gives a section of the kidney. This is of the control fish. So these are the various parts of the kidney showing the different regions of the uriniferous tubules. You have the glomerulus, you have the proximal region, Bowman's capsule, the collecting tubule, the distal tubule. And this picture gives you how the effect, what effect cadmium has on the cells of the kidney. It shows intense cytoplasmic vacuolation, changes in glomeruli, accumulation of, some sort of material within the collecting tubules. Then you have nuclei of the epithelial cells which shift. There is accumulation of some sort of eosinophilic substance. A lot of changes are seen in the kidney. So here again, we have the electron microscopic changes which are shown in the proximal region of the kidney, that is the uriniferous tubule of the kidney. So this is how the control fish electron microscope looks like. And this is the one of the treated fish. So a lot of changes, as I mentioned, mitochondrial vacuolation, electron dense material, reduction in the cytoplasmic granules, endoplasmic reticulum is dilated. So all these effects basically tell you how the entire organ toxicity starts getting initiated, and it leads to what we call as cell necrosis or apoptosis, or what we call as carcinogenicity. This is the picture of spleen, and here you can see this is the control spleen and this is the treated spleen. So here you can see that there are certain deposits of hemosiderin and certain areas which are lightly stained, that is referred to as hypochromic condition. So all these changes have mainly occurred because of contamination of cadmium in the various tissues of the fish. This slide depicts the electron microscopic changes in the spleen. So this is the picture of the control spleen. And here we have the treated spleen, again showing presence of electron dense material, then the change in the shape of the cells, then there is vacuolation, dilation of endoplasmic reticulum, and very distinctly you can see mitochondrial vacuolation. So these are the various changes at the cellular level which are seen in the spleen. And here you can see a lot of necrosis. This is cell death. You can see all this cell debris which has got accumulated in the spleen. And this is the picture of the liver. So most of these organs which I studied of the fish had lot of changes at the cellular level and at the organ level, which basically tells us that these heavy metals are definitely harmful for the environment. And fish, as I told you, being a part of the food chain, can be used as a sensitive bioindicator for heavy metal contamination in aquatic systems. So this was a little bit about the work which I have carried out for my doctorate. And hence, I just wanted to make you aware about the toxicity of cadmium and how we should be a little more cautious, and we should religiously follow rules and regulations which are stipulated under the OECD guidelines for discard of industrial waste or for use of heavy metals or products which contain these heavy metals. So this was what I wanted to brief you all about and make you aware about regarding cadmium toxicity. And we have carried out a lot of research on cadmium toxicity in the environment. So now I think we should be taking up projects which involve removal or reduction of heavy metals in the environment. And very few experiments which have been carried out till date, they say that we can, reduce the heavy metals in the environment. And for cadmium, different methods have been utilized. So they have, I have listed a few of the, you can say, methods which lead to a reduction in the toxic load by cadmium heavy metal. So here the first one which has been mentioned is use of bioremediation. So we have bacterial populations which are capable of reducing the toxic load in the environment. Or we can use phytoremediation, where certain specific types of plants, they can be utilized for remediation of either the soil or the wastewaters which have been polluted with toxic substances. So there are different plants. You must have heard of Icornia. That's a free-floating plant which is commonly found everywhere, that is known to absorb heavy metals in the water. Then you have sunflower, then you have corn, hemp, tobacco, Indian mustard. So cadmium absorption can be carried out by plants. So if you need to reduce the cadmium in the environment, this is one way by which you can, do it. Then another one is use of nanotechnology, where they make use of chelating agents. So magnetic nanoparticles which are coated with silica and functionalized with this chelating agent helps binding of the heavy metals. And then the nanoparticles can be again isolated from the solution, and these can be recycled. So different ways are nowadays being looked into through research. Then we have this use of low-cost absorbents, which represents a promising green technology for removal of cadmium from wastewaters. So here you can see these products, they are basically obtained from agricultural produce. So you have activated carbon, walnut shells, rice husk. All these can be utilized and reused for various cycles of adsorption of cadmium from the environment. Well, coming to the last part of my talk, I need to give you a little advice regarding how you can be a little more careful with heavy metal toxicity. So these are small things which can make a huge difference coming to think of it. So just think, when you consume wild mushrooms, do it with caution. When you use cosmetics which contain lead, cadmium, aluminium, these would be the various things which you use in your day-to-day life, the deodorants, the lipsticks, the hair cosmetics, the eyeliners, all of them contain heavy metals. Then avoid beverages in aluminum cans. Then use of ceramic dental fillings instead of using amalgams of various metals. Then washing of your fruits and vegetables at least 2 to 3 times. As I mentioned, the fertilizers contain huge amounts of cadmium as the heavy metal. So if you need to remove the fertilizers from your vegetables and fruits, you need to wash them thoroughly. Give preference to organic foods. avoid excessive amounts of seafood. So, the organisms in the sea, they have a tendency to bioaccumulate. They have a tendency to biomagnify. Then use of water filters, wearing of masks and protective clothing if you work around heavy metals, or if you're working in an industrial area, or involved in mining or smelting or refining activities. So these are the things which we definitely need to think now that you are made aware of. Okay. And they also suggest that we need to keep healthy diet. And there are certain foods which are referred to as metal detox foods. So they say that we should include these foods: cilantro, garlic, wild blueberries, chlorella, green tea, tomatoes, and probiotics. They help in removal of heavy metals uh, contamination from the human body. Drink good amounts of water and juice. 35 to 40 minutes of physical activity on a daily basis so that you sweat. And they say that even if when you take a steam bath or a sauna bath, that also helps to throw out all the toxins from your body. So these are just a few methods which can help to relieve any sort of heavy metal toxicity if it has occurred or is occurring in your body. And these are just a few of the references which I have used for my talk today. Thank you.
Thank you, Meenakshi madam, for a wonderful.
Hello.
Manjit, a very nice presentation. Slides were excellent. Very nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody has any doubts can please ask questions.
Madam, really a good talk. We actually know about arsenic and mercury, this heavy metals and all that, because that is mostly publicized. But cadmium is less known among the common general public, and your slides were really very, illustrative and explanatory, and you gave an excellent presentation. It was very nice to learn about cadmium toxicity that we have all around us, and you also gave the solution. Actually, one of my questions was going to be like, there's so much of cadmium toxicity that we are experiencing. How do we actually try and avoid that? So, if there is something more that you would like to tell, please share, because you have actually explained in the slide at the end over there, how we can actually say stay away from, or reduce the toxicity of heavy metals around us and all that.
Yeah, so I hope you have got some idea regarding the way in which heavy metal contamination occurs, and what are the few things which you need to do, or keep in mind when you're having your day-to-day activities. These things immediately don't come to our mind, like say, use of cosmetics, the type of food which you eat, the drinking water, the place where you go, say if you go for an industrial visit, you do not realize that the air could be contaminated. So these are things which you should be made aware of. And once you are aware of, then, nowadays we have these kits for heavy metal testing for different metals. So, which are easily available now. So if you feel that you are having some sort of symptoms related to heavy metal toxicity, then definitely you should get yourself tested and get treated. Because if you leave it untreated, then it can be disastrous in the long run.
And I was also surprised to know that mushrooms contain a lot of cadmium.
Yeah, so there are different varieties also in case of mushrooms.
Yeah.
So not all, but a few of them, the wild ones, which could be growing in polluted soils. We do not know these things.
Hmm.
We need to be very careful regarding the
There is
use
one
of.
Preeti Singh who has raised her hand. Preeti, what question? You can ask your question. Unmute and ask. It must be by mistake. Who is Preeti Singh? Suresh, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks, man. Thank you for your information. But my question is that is the cadmium is affected by using aluminum utensil?
Hello.
Yes, they say that it can also lead to toxicity.
Okay.
Am I audible? Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you for the very nice and kind this presentation, ma'am. Actually, I am also working on this cadmium, and my question is, in my the practical work,
Yes.
among many of the heavy metals, I got cadmium is not detectable. So it could be. I mean, I'm just worried that it could be any technical error that it is not like showing the presence of cadmium, or like how to confirm that there is not any technical error, but the cadmium is absent in the sample.
No, so for analysis, you have to carry out the analysis using atomic absorption spectroscopy.
Yeah, ma'am.
So from that, you can find out the concentration of your toxicant, how much it is.
Yes, ma'am. I have done with that IAS method only. So in there, it is showing not detectable range. So that is for sure it is not present, no, ma'am.
Yeah. So those are also, you have to be very careful with the because the sensitivity of that instrument, the glass apparatus which you use for digestion, whether it's dry digestion or wet digestion.
Yeah, ma'am.
You have to, do it a few number of times before you are sure.
Yeah, ma'am. Understood.
Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am. Yeah.
Can we proceed, madam, towards the end?
Yeah, no more questions. So actually, there are a lot of projects which can still be done on cadmium, but according to me, instead of introducing more cadmium into the environment, I think now we should go in the reverse direction and try to remove cadmium out of the environment.
Madam, I just small, I think it is a very nice query, but you also pointed out, that cadmium exists in cosmetics and food also. So
Yes.
food we can understand. So
Yes.
how does one, identify that there is no cadmium or very less cadmium at all in, say, cosmetics that are being used? Because
It is there, I'm
otherwise,
telling you.
otherwise it is usually felt like, people who consume non-veg are the most affected with all kind of contaminants. So here you have highlighted that there is nothing, no bias towards the people who eat veg or non-vegetarian. Whatever diet they follow, they are susceptible to the contamination that is there around. So is there any measure by, say, the Indian government or anything which highlights or makes it mandatory that these metals are listed on the products that are on sale, or is there some measure that can be put in practice?
Yeah, we should try and see, whether we can limit the usage of such things. Eventually, the effect may not be so much for people who don't use it so regularly, but people who are into heavy use of these cosmetics which contain heavy metals eventually will get affected. if it shows that the preparations involve heavy metals. Why cosmetics? Even this use of Ayurvedic treatment, that is also supposed to be, now causing a lot of alarm, because many heavy metals are used in these Ayurvedic preparations as well.
Yeah, lead is very common there.
Yeah. So you have to be careful. So if you are undergoing Ayurvedic treatment, you should also ensure that you undergo heavy metal testing, because it should not happen that you get treated for some disease and then you get into some other problem.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yes, madam. But that is the challenge for the common man now.
Yes, it is. So now anything and everything is polluted. We have to be careful of how much to use and how to use.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you so much.
Welcome. So I hope it was an eye-opener for some of the students. Of course, in science, we are all aware about the ill effects of such things. But still, I think more awareness has to be created regarding heavy metals.
Madam, can we move ahead?
Yeah, sure. So thank you so much for
Thank you so much,
having
madam. Yeah.
Thank you.
given me this opportunity to share whatever knowledge I have regarding this particular topic.
Sincere thanks to Professor Dr. Meenakshi Sundaresan, madam, for her enlightening, enriching, and informative talk on the cadmium toxicity in the environment, the effects of the same on living organisms, on the food chain, and the different ways it affects the human body. And I'm sure it will be enlightening for the students to take up new projects, as she has mentioned, and will be surely beneficial to them in their career in the long run. Thank you so much, madam, for accepting our invitation and coming online on this platform and sharing your ideas on the same. Thanks to Principal Panse, madam, for constant help and support throughout the sessions, throughout the programs that we carry out in the academic years. Also, thanks to Principal Scientist Golden Sir for his valuable comments and presence. I would also like to thank all the Vice Principals of Arts, Science and Commerce. Thanks are also due to Dr. Vaishnavi Somni, USC Coordinator and Head of the Department of Zoology, for her help and support in the program. I would sincerely like to thank Dr. Rishikesh Dalvi Sir, Suprita Madam, and all faculties of the Zoology Department for extending their help and support to me in this program. Thanks are all due to all the students for their patient listening, and I'm sure they will carry home lot of information, lot of knowledge which madam has shared with us today. Thank you once again, madam. I would also like to thank at the end our technical team, Professor Ayyappan sir and his team, Rajesh and Swapnil, for their help from the technical aspect of the session. A big thank you to each and every one of you for making this event successful. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Bye, Manjit.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you soon.
Yeah, see you. Bye-bye.
Bye, Golden.
Bye,
Thank you. Yeah, thank you,
Bye-bye,
madam. Thank
Golden
you all.
sir.
Yeah, bye. Yeah, thank you so much. Bye. Yeah,
Bye, madam. Bye, sir.
bye. Bye.